We seek the truth.
Would you be handing your resignation to the Minister of Culture tomorrow, sir?
No, I will not.
The leader of the opposition, you have accused your government, sir, of using the Grenada Development Bank to facilitate the financing of personal loans for certain government ministers.
The other side is in no position to talk about those issues, and I will leave it there.
We discover new perspectives.
You know his leadership style, and so many are saying, why are you coming now to talk about those issues?
Now is the time to speak. You have the right to decide who will take over.
And you met with Dr. Mitchell, and perhaps you might want to confirm what that meeting was about in your response. But
Dr. Mitchell, like myself, are Grenadians.
We ask the right questions.
Why was there no report on the work done of the commission? And how is this new committee different from the commission that was initially established back in 2022? So who are these elements that are using you?
I'm disappointed in my political leader.
And why is that animating those political conversations now?
It's a very interesting question.
The Bubb Reports with Dr. Kellan Bubb. Thought-provoking, truthful, unbiased, and truly original reporting.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of the Bubb Report. I am your humble host, Dr. Kellan Bubb. We are happy that you can join us this week. Now, as you are joining the live stream, please remember to like and share this week's edition of the program. If you're watching us on YouTube, please remember to like the program and hit the subscribe bell to keep abreast of our new content every week. Now, for this week's editorial, we focus on the post-burial recovery efforts on the sister isles of Carriacou and Petite Martinique. In the last week, it has been brought to our attention by some property owners and residents in Carriacou of a concerning spike in looting and vandalism incidents. We fielded a message written by one resident who chooses to be anonymous, who said, quote, "My fellow kayaks, apparently there is an ongoing situation that is happening in Carriacou that no one is talking about. And the Grenadian government are not taking the issue seriously. I know that the people of Carriacou are steadily getting back to normal after Hurricane Beryl. But what is happening now is that crime is on the rise on the little island of Carriacou. People who live abroad, who own homes and businesses in Carriacou, are finding themselves being victimized by people on the island that are breaking into their homes and stealing any and everything. This has to stop. This is not what the Carriacou people is about. And we do not steal from our own. The government, according to this person, needs to tackle this issue immediately." Unquote. Another resident who wishes also to remain anonymous said, quote, "There has been a constant stream of looting activities since Beryl passed. Cruisers who took refuge in the mangrove have been systematically threatened and robbed. Solar panels, dinghies, outboards, anything is being stolen. Looting and robbing is happening to locals and expats alike." This resident goes on to say, quote, "There is no police patrols or any visible police presence. I myself was standing in a queue for gas several weeks ago with a jerry can. People were pushing in, shouting. It was mayhem. 2 police officers on the side of the road stood there and watched and did absolutely nothing. Cars are also now being broken into to steal batteries, possibly to use with stolen solar panels. Incidents have been reported, but no action from the police. I widely shared a post regarding a battery theft, and it actually came to the attention of the police who visited my friend, who was the victim. They were not happy because of the adverse publicity, but my friend went and made a report. To make a report, not something just noted in the police diary book, but a proper report, you have to ask for the yellow form, and then the report is handwritten. We were never told this. They have no way to take fingerprints. We know that a lot of stolen goods will never be recovered. We just want visible police presence and support to deter would-be looters and robbers. The Coast Guard to patrol the mangroves. Not hear about the police and the Guyanese sitting on the Mermaid Bar all day, unquote. These were two accounts from residents on the sister islands of Carriacou. And of course, these incidents also do not take into account the other concerns that residents have expressed, much to the chagrin of the Minister of Carriacou and Petite Martinique Affairs, who chastised one group of citizens, the teachers, who were appealing for some form of relief. Of course, we will be watching the Carriacou space over the next few weeks, as we have a list of scheduled programs that speaks to the Hurricane Beryl recovery on the island. But of course, more crucially and critically now, we also have to determine what the state's plan is for the students who are expected to return to school in September on the Sister Isles. What are the plans? We're hearing that perhaps the Minister of Education might be on leave at this time. We're hoping to get confirmation of what those plans are in the coming week. Of course, this is the Bubb Report. We will be right back with the first segment of the program. Please stand by.
Tell us, a commissioner of police, tell a politician, back off. You have no knowledge of the law. You have no knowledge of law enforcement. You cannot force my officers to do the wrong thing.
But that is somebody's son. That is somebody's child. That is part of a family. And I think that is the part that they are missing out.
Because E and F are apt to be used oppressively.
It's like because we don't see disabled people as sexual beings, which is ridiculous.
You mean they don't want to listen to your version of science? They have their own science. You have your science.
What we need to do is teach people to think and not what to think.
Today, it's too bad that everybody do what they want.
If I could forgive Bernard Ford, then I could forgive Bob Morris too. And today, on this day, I no more have anything in my heart for what he did.
The education system has to be very fluid and dynamic because we're living in very different and changing times.
Treating all your citizens equally, all your citizens fairly, recognizing each group, not discriminating against one or the other.
And viewers and listeners, welcome back to this week's edition of the Bubb Report. Now, the Caribbean Examinations Council has reported a worrying surge in incidents of misconduct during its May to June 2024 exam sessions. The irregularities include candidates bringing unauthorized cell phones into the testing centers, engaging in outright cheating, and even impersonating other students. Nicole Manning, who is the CXC's Director of Operations, at a press conference last week said, quote, "It is a very serious matter, a very serious matter." Of course, she recounted one particular egregious case where a candidate was caught trying to pass themselves off as someone else. So, of course, according to Manning, the situation was identified and the candidate is not only disqualified, but debarred from sitting CXC examinations over the next 2 years. Now, this year saw 54 such incidents, which is a marked increase from 36 cases documented in 2023. And these aren't mere allegations, as Manning stressed. She said, quote, "Candidates have to sign to agree, yes, this is what happened." So we're not just making it up. The supervisors and invigilators are not making this up. They are telling you, I did this, unquote. One brazen candidate, Manning revealed, was even caught literally on their phone and admitted to Googling exam questions during the assessment. Now, here to make sense of these worrying rises and concerns of cheating and academic dishonesty at the CXC level are Dr. Nicole Manning, who is the Director of Operations at the Caribbean Examinations Council. Dr. Manning, if you can turn your camera on, there you are, as well as Dr. James Young. Dr. James Young, I understand it, is a Grenadian, and he is the acting senior manager of examinations, development, and production. Did I get that correct, Dr. Young? If you would just unmute the
Yes,
mic.
you did. Yes, you did.
Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this week's edition of the Bubb Report.
Good morning.
Absolutely. And Dr. Manning, I want to get straight to you now. Of course, in spite of these concerns of academic dishonesty, the results, of course, with respect to CXC, does also demonstrate some very positive tea leaves, and we will get to those. We cannot only talk about the negatives, but we also have to talk about the positive elements of the results, because I think for the most part, a vast majority, a plurality of the students represented themselves well and their schools well. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's the approach, a balanced approach.
Absolutely. And that's what we do here on the Bubb Report. So thank you. Dr. Manning, I want to respect your time. Of course, you are Director of Operations. Now, talk to us about that specific role within the context of CXC and operations in the context of exams. What does that look like?
Okay, so thank you again, Dr. Bubb, and
yes,
good morning to you and your listeners and viewers. So for the Caribbean Examinations Council, we have a whole division that treats with examination services. That means everything from registration of the candidate all the way through to certification of that candidate. And so we have that whole strategy of managing the execution of these exams, and we work with who we call our local registrars. And those local registrars are situated in all 16 territories, to which, of course, the Carriacou would have signed, but we do have 4 additional territories that also are engaged in our exam. So that's in a synopsis, giving a synopsis. Yes, that's what it is.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Now, let us talk about the cheating. And of course, in my day now, of course, I would be aging myself, and I'm sure both of you, ladies and gentlemen, would have taken CXC exams in a period when you did not have any technology. I believe the only technology you were able to walk into an exam room with was a calculator, if I'm not mistaken. Right? It was a calculator, and of course you had your pen and you had your physical paper. You had that physical paper, you had your answer sheet, right? And you had the little booklet that was also, because we studied with past papers before. So what has evolved and what has changed? And how are students taking exams now in this computer age?
So the Caribbean Examinations Council facilitates examinations in 2 ways. One, where we do the paper-based exam. We still do that because, of course, not all territories have the infrastructure to facilitate what we call our online assessment, and which is predominantly where we have the engagement of candidates utilizing an electronic platform to do their exams. And we encourage and continue to encourage territories as we work with them to at least have the candidates do the multiple choice examinations online, because that's a little bit easier, and it's easier for them and it's easier for the candidates. That's one. Two, the paper-based exams, of course, lends itself to many things, because you have to move the papers in terms of have the papers stored, and the administration, and then the movement of those physical papers to another location for the scanning and marking of the papers. So, of course, you have the security concerns that we always have, and that's why electronic assessment is really a better way to go. But that does not stop the whole opportunity of candidates for cheating, as you would have outlined in your preamble. So it doesn't stop the candidates from doing what they're doing in terms of the use of the smart devices that they now have, like the smart watches and so on. So we have to, CXC had to early look at what we need to do in relation to the management of those electronic devices.
So let's get down to brass tacks and the mechanics of exam day. So a student shows up to the exam center. They're allowed to go into the testing center with their phones and smart watches?
No, so they are not supposed to. It is the regulations of CXC that supervisors and invigilators manage the administration process, and candidates are not allowed to have their cellular phones or their smart watches or any such device with them. So if it is they're doing the exams electronically, they are utilizing the computer infrastructure as it obtains within the center. If it is, because we do have a bring your own device policy, the center would have put all the secure administration requirements. So that's a secure client that we use. So it locks the candidates away from the possibility of browsing on the net while doing the exams. So we do have systems in place to facilitate that absolute separation from the use of any other device outside of what is provided to facilitate the exam.
Okay, so in that case, I'm at a loss, therefore, to understand how these incidents of cheating happens. Is it then a failure of the invigilators in the testing centers to ensure that those best practices are enforced?
So I'll put it this way. The question is probably more so, yes, they should be monitoring the whole admission of candidates and what are they taking into the exams. But remember, people have creative ways of finding a way of carrying in the device that they want. So you see, I can look at your pencil case and I'm looking at everything, but you're not going to search a candidate, of course. And so those are other ways that you'll find. It's during the exams now, when, of course, the invigilators and supervisors are vigilant. Then they go through and they realize sometimes how persons are operating, different ways. We have ways of identifying the candidates when they look as if they're carrying out suspicious activities.
Right. So kudos to the invigilators and those for again paying attention to that. But in your press conference and in your press release, you noted a significant increase in these incidents from last year. I mean, that jump was just it really stood out to me. What factors do you think are contributing to this? Is it because we are now in the I call it the instant coffee era, where people want answers instantly, and we're now in the artificial intelligence era as well? What do you think would be accounting for those incidents? And now I'm sure that perhaps outside of the candidates admitting what they've done, I'm sure perhaps that is something that is on your radar, that is on the radar of educators in the region, to really understand why students are doing this.
Most definitely, this is not only a concern for the Caribbean Examinations Council. It is definitely a concern of the educational ecosystem as a whole. And so even as I presented the data and actually shared some opinions in this regard, the research has to be done. So we did an initial deep dive in terms of, I should say a preliminary review of the information we got for candidates who were absent, and also looking at what happened with the cheating. And one of the areas that came up for the absenteeism would have been the candidates ill preparedness for the activity. And so we are wondering, yes, so candidates decided not to turn up because they didn't think they were prepared. And candidates are cheating, meaning that they feel that they are not prepared, so they need some kind of assistance. So cheating may happen with the cell phone, which is the most popular one. But we did see cheating, of course, in terms of people attempting to share information within the examination space. And as of course, we would have shared the one incident that we had this year with the impersonation and so on. So there are different ways that candidates are using. So we're saying it may be top of mind for us to look at the preparedness of the candidates, because that I'm doing the correlation, but of course, as I said before, we would have to do a deeper dive, because we're saying candidates who appear and they are cheating. It means that they're saying to themselves, I need some assistance. So they are seeking a dishonest route, unfortunately, to find the information that they believe that they did not, they don't have the time or whatever it is to sit down and to make sure that they have that full preparedness for the exams. So that may be one of the big points that we need to look at.
Right. Absolutely. And that's a very important point. Now, what other safeguards would CXC be putting in place moving forward? And of course, we have not even gotten to the AI conversation as yet. But what safeguards, following from what your preliminary data is suggesting, that you're hoping to put forward to arrest this situation moving forward for other exams?
So some of the controls will include not only sensitization of the candidates, and we believe their better understanding of what it means for them if they're caught, because you absolutely lose everything. You are disqualified, and that's is a big one, I believe, for candidates. Then being debarred is another big one for 2 years. So those are factors, I believe, with a greater knowledge of that. 2, in relation to the vigilance, of course, we can continue to beef that up, but more so to work with the education system to find out what other mechanism we can use so that candidates are not allowed to enter in the centers, and especially where we are not seeing the cheating. Look at those good practices and see what we can do where that is concerned. Additionally, so the communication is one strategy. The actual greater detail in terms of preparation, in terms of review of the candidates, what they have on them, and their what's happening in terms of what they're taking into the exams, and not even allowing them to have some of those bags and so on in the examination space. So, in the past, we'd have had a location where bags are kept, but closer to the examination center. Things like that, we will definitely have to remove. And those are some of the controls. We cannot afford candidates to have those things in this exam space at all. So, we have to look at areas like that. And it's not a Caribbean Examinations Council alone, and it has never been. I must say thanks to the Ministries of Education, who they work with us under the auspices of the local registrars to get this done. So there are many things that we will do, but more so on the day and in preparation, the communication and sensitization, not only have to avoid, but also the penalties in relation to this.
Absolutely. Accountability and consequences, something that growing up in Grenada, it's something that we took seriously as young people, because there were consequences of your action. Let's get to artificial intelligence. What does that look like, and how is CXC confronting this new age of artificial intelligence, where a student can not only Google an answer, but they can go to OpenAI to have OpenAI write an essay for them, or to do an SBA for them?
So you see, the thing about the school-based assessment, and I will give this response, and as I told you before, I'll have to leave early, but I'll give this response and allow Dr. Young to come in here. But let me say to you, one, there are systems that will protect the integrity of the assessment process. One, while CXC is saying, yes, you have artificial intelligence, and we are absolutely not saying that the candidates will not use it. What we're saying, it's how there it is being utilized. Remember, candidates are required to produce their own work. And so, like we do good research, and we all know that you have to make sure that you give the account referencing where you the source of the information. So what we're saying is two things. One, the utilization of the information is one area of one way in terms of how we have to manage that. You do have AI checkers to help the candidates to understand that referencing is absolutely important. Then the other important point is the changing how we assess the candidates. So it is something that we are looking at. We're not walking away from it. We're not afraid of it. AI is here to stay. And what we're saying is we cannot just sit at the recall level, because these candidates are candidates who will be utilizing artificial intelligence as they create their own businesses and as they work with others. So what we're saying, let's change the methodology. So we use information is at your fingertips. So let's look more at the interrogative way of doing assessment. You know, you have the questioning, you have different the analytical components, synthesizing. So you take it to another level and allow the candidates to do that kind of work, because the school-based assessment in particular augurs well for learning for the candidates learning. It's an iterative process. So really the teachers are supposed to be facilitating the feedback and loop and in everything in relation to the assessment process. So it's a different approach, and it's something that will not happen overnight, but we are saying to the candidates, make sure that you give honor where honor is due, and that's the referencing process that we all know in terms of making sure that we do not plagiarize somebody else's work, because it's all about artificial intelligence, because it has its way of hallucinating and providing some incorrect information. So candidates have to be careful of that, and that's where the guidance of your teacher or facilitator is very important as they go through this learning process.
Yep. Dr. Manning, I want to respect your time, so I would proceed with some closing comments, and then I would get Dr. Young to piggyback on, especially on the AI conversation here.
Correct.
So any closing comments from you before we go over to Dr. Young?
I'll just say thanks for having me, and I'll say continue to say to our education system, particularly as we start and look forward to preparation for a new, well, they've started already, but the new academic year coming up, where we start with the end in mind. And remember that we want to be successful, and it can only happen through hard work and education. How we do it, integrity is going to be very important, and we are here to work with the education system to make this happen. We analyze the data not only on a regional basis, but we work with the various territories to analyze their individual national data and to see how we can assist and create those strategies to make it better. So thank you very much, Dr. Bubb, and to your listeners and viewers, all the best.
Absolutely. Dr. Manning, thank you so much. And I will go over to our fellow Grenadian compatriot here, Dr. Young, Dr. James Young. Welcome to the Bubb Report, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Bubb. Good morning, and just want to bring greetings to all of my Grenadian peoples at home and in the diaspora. It's a pleasure being here. Happy to join the conversation. Before I continue, I just wanted to wish Grenada, happy 50. Celebrate the successes of our Olympians, every one of them. And really, I want to take this opportunity here to just bring condolences to the family, the SJC family, on the passing of Mrs. Dubois. I worked with her. And also to the GBSS family, Mr. Mackenzie, whom we have lost and whom we clearly love. So I just wanted to share that before continuing the conversation on AI.
Yes, absolutely. And of course, yes, I did not know the educator at the GBSS, but there were a lot of outpouring on, I believe he taught geography, correct?
Yes, he did.
Yes. And of course, Mrs. Dubois as well. I knew her as well. So condolences to those families, and thank them for their services to education in Grenada. They were selfless educators.
Indeed.
And so indeed, thank you for that acknowledgement. So let us get into this conversation, and I want to preface what we're going to talk about by making the point that not everyone is a good test taker. and everyone has different learning styles. Now, back when we attended high school, it was always felt that you were quote unquote bright if you took tests well and you got 40 CXC subjects. I'm just exaggerating here. And that if you did not pass common entrance on the 3 attempts and you did school leaving, that somehow you were thrown to the academic dustbin without realizing that, of course, you also you're probably technically inclined. And so I believe we are now living in an era when things like artificial intelligence and technology is making those attempts at learning perhaps more efficient than it was back then. So, but let us talk about how CXC in particular is rising to the occasion of the evolutions that we're seeing in technology, especially in respect to things like artificial intelligence.
All right. So just going on from what Dr. Manning shared,
yes.
Indeed, we are embracing the artificial intelligence in every area, but currently we are working on a framework for its use, its ethical use in every facet of test development, administration, and then, of course, with respect to results and so forth, right? So we are working on that framework, and that framework will guide us because we recognize, for example, a lot of these AI systems that persons use, they're trained on data that is not necessarily correct, right? So when we are going to use it, whether it's for item creation, test development, etc., and we put our validation checks in there because we understand we must have the human element in there. It must show evidence that it is trained on data that we are confident in, right? So it would not be bringing back to us errors and so on. With respect to the students and using them in their SBAs, because it's that opportunity for them to learn to use information in a meaningful way, in a responsible way. And we are saying, yes, use the AI, and as Dr. Manning indicated, with the teachers being trained, with that framework that we will develop, it would be shared. I know that's the intention of our registrar and CEO, Dr. Wesley, who gives his apologies for not being able to be here, that when the students use the AI, they must be able to analyze the data and be able to realize what is truth and what is error, what is a fact and what is not true, and how to use that information in pulling together their reports and to give credit to where credit needs to be given. So all of that framework is currently being developed with other partners, inputs from other stakeholders, and so on.
And who are those stakeholders, if you don't mind sharing, that you are consulting with? I suspect the teachers obviously would be.
Yeah, definitely. You have the ministries. You would include teachers. You know that our registrar and team is having a lot of stakeholder engagements in various territories, speaking with the different levels, including students, union representatives, teachers, employers, federations, etc., so that they give their inputs as to how this thing, these things should work and how we should move forward.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about the students, because as an educator, I am a professor, and I have gone old school for many of my capstone assignments, where students are expected to take notes in class, such that they will not go on AI. They have to rely on my notes, and they also have to rely on how I tinker with material in the curriculum. in order to write their essays. So in many respects, I've sort of AI-proofed a lot of my assignments. But, you know, students will still find ways of working around that. So have we come up with ways of, again, outside of teaching more critical thinking in respect of how the students are utilizing the technology, to ensure that the students are retaining the material that they are being taught, to ensure that the students understand the material that they're being taught and not relying on a machine to just regurgitate something for a homework assignment that they would need to do. Because they can just go on Google and have Google or have OpenAI.chat-GPT answer the questions for them.
Yeah, and that's a good question. Really, from our end, it's really to protect the integrity of the assessment, where we continue to work with our invigilators who continue to be vigilant. The fact is, in our examination, they're not supposed to have access to these devices or connectivity to be able to use OpenAI and so forth when taking the actual exam. Our major concern would be at this point the school-based assessment and how it's being used. But for us, we do appreciate and value the work of teachers in the process of completing the school-based assessment as a checker, a safeguard, as a gatekeeper, to ensure that the work that is being presented definitely is that of the student. So even though they utilize the AI to pull information, they still have to, again, analyze it and present it in such a way that they understand the information and maintain the integrity in doing so. Mm-hmm. So for our actual exams, it's not so much of a concern, because when they do the exam electronically, for the most part, except I know for digital media and so forth, because of the nature of that test, and it's digital, so the questions that are being asked are different. Mm-hmm. But for the multiple choice examinations, the systems are locked down. So they cannot go to OpenAI and ask XYZ, if you understand what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Very well. Now let us get into the other element of the 2024 exams that I think is worth celebrating, and that has to do with the results. Of course, literacy and numeracy sort of undergirds a lot of what CXC does, and there is still, I believe, a very critical and important place for the fundamentals of things like CXC. I see a commenter saying, well, we need to do away with CXC. I do not subscribe to that. I do think people need to be empowered with those literacy and numeracy skills that are essentially life skills. Yes, they are life skills. And so let us talk about this year's results, especially in the context of the sciences. For me, I'm very much interested in the sciences and the technical subjects. What does the data say about those?
Right. So with respect to the sciences, generally the data shows consistency in the performance of the candidates, right? For example, in CSEC biology, we have 76% achieving grades 1, 2, and 3 in 2024, with 21% achieving grade 1s, right? The number of candidates taking the examination generally consistent, above 16,000, right? With chemistry, although there was a slight decline in 2024, it is better than 2020 compared to 2023, but it is better than 2022, 2021 at 64%, right, across the region, and 18% grade 1s, 19% grade 2s, and 27% grade 3s, right? For physics, we have here, of the more than 13,000 candidates who did the exam, a 72% achievement in physics, right? Which is a 10% increase over 2023. where we had now 20% achieving grade 1, 22% grade 2, and 30% at the grade 3 level, right? So they have achieved the acceptable grades. And then the integrated science, I know you might be interested in that one.
Yes.
That had a slight decline over the previous years. 58% of the candidates achieving grades 1, 2, and 3, with 5% grade 1. Well, and that's the lowest in the last few years, though. 21% grade 2s and 32% grade 3s. But all in all, for science across the region, it has been pretty good, given the regional thrust, a national thrust, to develop the STEM aspect of it. I know we'll talk about math a little bit later, right? Of course, we have human and social biology as well, which we know it's a subject that persons take, especially if they want to get into some nursing programs, etc. And this year, 80% of the candidates achieved the acceptable grades 1, 2, and 3, compared with 71% in 2023 and 67% in 2022. And that those stats are indeed encouraging. We are happy when persons achieve, and we just want to say to individuals that indeed, if you perform, it has nothing to do with the group. I know persons figure that we grade on a curve or so. I just want to say this now. Everyone can achieve. Everyone can ace the exam. It is based on you and your performance with respect to the standards that have been set at the Caribbean Examinations Council. So that's the science in a nutshell, Dr. Bubb.
Absolutely. It's good to see those continuing trends in the hard sciences there in a positive direction. What about math? And that goes to the numeracy aspect of it. Now, in previous years, I've seen some trends that were concerning to me in that area. But what does 2024 look like?
Yeah, Dr. Bubb, I'm sure the information is out there, but just to repeat, in 2024, we had 36% of the candidates achieving acceptable grades at preliminary release, compared with, we had 41 in 2023, 37% in 2022, and 34% in 2021. However, with this result, though, we have, in the last 4 years, the highest number of grade 1s being achieved at 9% in 2024. We had 8% in 2023, 6% in 2022, and 7% in 2021. So it says more or less, if we look at how it has been, and this has happened since after 2020, COVID, the performance we have seen a decline. I think in 2024, it was that 34% was extremely worrying. It's not new for us, but I think the system is at a breaking point now where something has to be done with respect to mathematics and the performance in mathematics.
Yeah, let us, I'm not sure if you wanted to add anything else, but let us talk about that. I mean, you, sir, are also an educator. What do you think? I mean, and for full disclosure, I also failed math on my first attempt. I actually did math as a private candidate. That time, they were offering private classes at the TMRSU Community College before I can get into the TAMCC, because you needed both as a prerequisite to get into the TAMCC at the time. I'm not sure if that has changed, but what factors do you think contributes to that? I mean, I know for me personally, I didn't like math because of the teacher.
Wow.
It wasn't so much that I didn't like the subject, but that was a factor back then. But what do you think are some of the factors contributing to this?
Well, the truth is, if we look at the system, because we see this at the CSEC level, right?
Yes.
Look at the primary school level. If we look at the performance in mathematics and so forth, at that level, across the region, if you go to different territories and you ask what the performance is like, you would recognize that there's a problem even down there. It manifests itself, and it's blown up at this level. I'm not sure exactly. I could only posit that in some instances, the abstract nature of the mathematics is a challenge, and more so coming out from COVID, because these candidates of ours mostly would have spent a lot of time doing math electronically, online, right? And we know the nature of the subject already. It is challenging, and I just want to join your voice and say that it's an important subject because of, to me, what it does for your brain and development of your logical thinking and ability to process information and decisions, etc. It could be that since that time, being able to work through those and make it meaningful to everyday life, etc., may have affected these candidates in that way. Given that before the 2020 period, 2021, before 2021, the candidates were performing. We had average around 50% candidates passing the examination.
Mm-hmm. So we are chalking this up to the impacts of COVID. And of course, math is also very applied. It's a very applied course. Yes, it's a very applied subject. And so that particular tutelage definitely needs that hands-on approach from the educator-student perspective. What about the other sciences? Meaning here, the technological sciences. I'm sure that's the kids are on board with those now.
Yes, they're definitely on board with that. We've had in information technology above 80% of our candidates achieving the acceptable grades 1 to 3, and this year we had 17% of them getting grade 1s, and that augurs well. I want to speak to, I know we were talking a lot of our CSEC level, but there's also the CAPE. We do have digital media, we do have animation and game design, although they're undersubscribed. Given our national and regional thrust for development in these areas, we would want to see more persons taking them. However, the candidates generally perform very well, with almost 100% of them achieving the acceptable grades, performing and demonstrating their competence in digital media and animation and game design. I know you had asked about some of the technical subjects, and to speak to like industrial technology, if I may, if you don't have another question on the technology.
No, speak to that, because I think it's also important for people to appreciate that CXC is maintaining relevance with the times. Yes,
yeah. You are. and I just want everyone to understand, be reminded of who we are as CXC. We're Caribbean. We have been created for the Caribbean so that we can have culturally relevant examinations, and then we can develop and administer examinations that are going to support the human capital development initiatives in every territory. So when you see subjects come on, it is because we recognize, hey, there's a need, that the ministries of education and so forth have said, look, we want to do this, and we would need a way to certify competence. And so these programs are developed. So we continue with these programs that are relevant. In industrial technology this year, of course, we have 3 areas: building, electrical, and mechanical technology. In the building, we have 93% of the candidates achieving acceptable grades, and that's the highest in the past 4 years. We've had a drop in the electrical, though at 72% in 2024, compared with 83 in previous years. The mechanical, however, is at 84%, of the candidates achieving acceptable grade, compared with 80 and 82% in previous years. And we appreciate that every area of society and every area of development has to have some examination or certification. We even have the food and nutrition and health, for example, consistently at high 80 in the percentages. So our candidates who do these examinations are doing quite well, and that is to be celebrated.
Absolutely. Now, one pain point for many citizens of the Caribbean, though perhaps in the minority of our Caribbean citizens, was the removal of agricultural science. And I'm going to throw a curveball at you here, sir.
That's not a curveball, sir.
Well, talk to us about that decision quality. Why was there a need to even make that decision? I know that part of that had to do with the fact that there isn't a demand for that. Perhaps it's not as quote unquote attractive or whatever it is. But again, food security is national security, and therefore courses like agricultural science, I believe, and perhaps how perhaps there needs to be a reframing of agricultural science as agribusiness and food security,
perhaps.
Right? And perhaps students might find it more attractive. So thoughts on that? What did that look like this year, and that particular decision?
Well, Dr. Bubb, as a farmer myself,
yes,
I feel it and I understand the concerns, and perhaps that's a nice way to reframe the subject.
Yeah.
Let me first say that we were not doing away with agricultural science.
Okay.
There are two programs. There's the Agricultural Science Single Award, and then there's the Agricultural Science Double Award. So I just want to clarify that out there, right? The Double Award is very much undersubscribed, meaning you have just about 1,000 candidates across the region sitting that examination. Although this year, 99% of them achieved acceptable grades, grade 1 to 3. And 2023, there was 100%, 2022, 96%. For the agricultural science, there's a single award, which attracts about 8,000 candidates yearly, and 88% of the candidates would have achieved the acceptable grades in 2024. So the subject that was in question was the double award, but it was not that it was being done away with. There was to be a conversation with the ministries of education, and that information just got out there beforehand, and it was just blown up in a different way. We are committed at the Caribbean Examinations Council to supporting this area. It is very important. Food security is important, and hence in the past few years we've developed the CAPE Agricultural Science program. So it's not that we're doing away with agricultural science. We see the importance of it. And while that CAPE one is not as much subscribed even as the double award, we were not going to do away with it because it is important at that level, to be able to provide some form of certification to persons interested in agriculture. And it deals with things like machinery and all of these, how to use them in agriculture, and modern methods of farming, etc. So we are committed.
Can you explain the distinction between the single and the double award?
The double award, there's an aspect of the syllabus. There's some extra content that is, I believe, that is covered. I do not want to speak incorrectly. I think it has to do with extra livestock. So they do deeper study in agriculture than just a single award. So while a single award, for example, may just focus on poultry, I'm just giving it an example, but the syllabus would definitely outline what that difference is. The double award goes deeper with more animals, etc. for study.
Mm-hmm.
So it is considered like two subjects, and the single award is considered one. Yes.
Right. Okay. We have a question here from a viewer who is asking, how does the percentage pass rate of the, I'm guessing the CXC, the O-level math level, compare with the CSEC pass rate?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. Let me see if I could pull that up quickly.
That's from Khalees Tanatha. Yes.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. What I would say, however, is that the number of persons taking the CCSLC examinations is very small, right? Compared with the number taking the CSEC math examination.
Okay.
Right? We do have above about 80%, if I believe, getting the master and competent, at least being competent in there. And that's at the CCSLC level. But as I said, the number of candidates is small, right? Taking the examination. So to compare the two might be a little bit off. What would be good research though, and of course, I think that's where the person asking the question is coming from, is to see how the persons who did at CCSLC would have done at the CSEC level, to see whether or not there's, how it translates, and how that helps them more or less.
Yeah, absolutely. Someone is saying, Onika St. John is saying, I hope not too much AI is being used for grading purposes.
No. We're, at this point in time, I don't know what you mean by AI for grading purposes. You can have, and we have to be real and sensitive within the region, because if we were to talk about AI to automatically score math or English and so forth, it is being utilized throughout the world. But for us, we are taking a very careful approach, because we must train the systems, right, to be able to do that within a 95% confidence, right? So that we don't have that type of fallout. So we have not gotten there as yet. And when we do, certainly the research and the information regarding what we have done to get there will be shared.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are very good points. We have another viewer comment. Mathematics is a different and unique subject unlike others. It requires a lot of attention and practice. One cannot look at the sums, read it, and feel they're adequately prepared. When a mathematical concept is taught, a student can indicate to the teacher if she doesn't understand right. Then and there. Practice the same math. So there is a bit of
in their spare time.
Concept in their spare time, or make use of YouTube videos for a more visual explanation. And yes, this view is right, of course, because at the end of the day, different students have different learning styles, and we also have to appreciate that not every student is a good test taker. Not every student will get that particular mathematical concept right on the first jump. So I'm sure you're agreeing with that viewer there.
Yes, definitely. Yes. Whatever we can do to get them, and they learn differently. As you hinted before, the different learning styles and so forth for the students, we have to try to meet them there, But of course, we have to support our teachers. It is not an easy job teaching in this time. Definitely. And I want to just shout them out. Kudos. We don't appreciate them as much as we should, because the work that they do is I don't know,
phenomenal.
Yes,
phenomenal.
Indeed, that's the word, phenomenal.
Yes, and I will not be the person I am today without the value that my educators poured into me in Grenada. And for those who are saying, oh, we need to do away with CXC and things like that, I want to remind us, and perhaps we need those reminders, that education is still one of the most sure-fit ways of getting out of poverty. I'm a testament to that. Had it not been for the foundation laid in Grenada, the academic and educational foundation laid in Grenada, and that can also be technical as well, I will not be the person I am today. Many of our students, many of our citizens of the Caribbean civilization do exceptionally well in North America. We are a sought-after commodity at universities and colleges. I know this for a fact because recruiters talk about Caribbean students and how very well heeled and disciplined they are when they come into those spaces. And it comes down to that educational foundation we receive at the CXC level, at the secondary school, and at the A level, at the community college level in the Caribbean. But I just thought I needed to say this. Dr. Young, and any closing comments from you? I'm sure Mr. Ashby, was Mr. Ashby your principal, sir? I'm sure he'd be very proud of you.
Of course, man. Mr. Ashby, I'm a product of the GBSS, non-Palma Sine Labore, always
Well,
dear to my
I
heart.
see you representing there.
Yes, definitely.
Yes.
I just want to shout them out. I really love my community. And
Yes.
I just want to say to everyone, all is not lost. I did not mention this because we are looking at modularization of certain subjects, meaning you take modules, and math will be one of those. And if persons are able to, you don't try to take too much, bite too much that you can't chew, you'd be able to take certain modules and get those out of the way, especially for persons who have left school, you're working and you're fighting up, you want to advance, there will be, those opportunities coming in the future. But all is not lost. While we celebrate those who have achieved, those who have not been able to get there, the worst thing is to give up. And we don't want you to give up. Look out, there are resources. There are ways to get there. There are people who are willing to help. There are programs available to continue to, work toward your goals, right? Align yourself with the right people. And I think as a people, as a region, we must come together and tackle all of these situations together. Everyone is not the same. Some of us take more time than others. I took more time in English than math. Right, Dr. Bubb? I may not have failed it, but certainly when we did general paper at college, my grade was not something that you wanted to see. So I'm just saying that some of us, it takes time, and don't rush it, but continue to work toward it.
Absolutely, and the message too to the students who may not have gotten 30, and I'm exaggerating here, 30 CXC passes. And kudos to the students who, were awarded those CXC passes. Kudos to them for doing the work. They earned those grades. I think we ought not to get to a place where we are mediocrizing accomplishments and successes. We have to celebrate those accomplishments and successes. The students worked hard, and I'm not talking about those who cheated. The students worked hard for their grade, and they must be celebrated. On the other hand, there might have been students who received 5 or 6 subjects, or who took 7 subjects and perhaps failed 3. This is not the end of the world.
No.
Yes? And perhaps this might just be an opportunity for you to just go back on the drawing board and see what you did wrong and do better next time. Use me as an example. And I don't think I ever shared this publicly on this platform. When I graduated, when I completed CXCs at the Presentation College, my mom was battling cancer at the time, and so it was my working class grandmother, and it was my mom's family who put together monies to help me to pay for the CXC subjects, because of course you have to pay for those. And I only did 6 CXC subjects. I passed 4. I failed 2. And of course, in that year, I was in a very competitive class, right? And all of those students got their grade 1s. I mostly got grade 2s. And so I went back and I did the subjects that I failed before going into the TMRSHO Community College. So all is not lost. Look at where I am today. But this is not to say that CXC and the PBC did not prepare me for the person I am today. Those were setbacks, but those were not setbacks that I used to define me. In fact, I use those to push me forward. So I think it's also important to make that point.
Yes. Very good.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm very
Dr.
proud of
Young,
you.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And we should celebrate the successes of our young men in the Caribbean, in spite of everything that's happening now, with the crime and
Yeah.
everything else.
Yeah,
We do have young men who are doing well.
I want to agree. Sometimes we focus a lot on the negatives and what we consider failures, but they're just opportunities for persons to recalibrate. Sometimes we force persons into areas that they're not suited for. And we as a people really need to realize that not everyone is going to be a doctor or a lawyer. And if you look at where we're going as a society, is it more of those we need? Or we don't want persons who can, really handle the electronics and the technology and so forth, robotics. These are the areas that will help advance our civilization and to ensure that our children and children's children have a place that is meaningful to survive and to live.
Yep, absolutely. Dr. Young, thank you so much for appearing on this week's edition of the Bubb Report, sir.
You're most welcome. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Viewers and listeners, this ends the first segment of the program where we were having a conversation on the tea leaves in respect to the 2024 CXC results that involved a high degree of academic dishonesty. And of course, what does AI look like for a testing and assessment moving forward, as well as AI as a tool, as a learning tool in the classroom? We were able to have that conversation. But of course, we were able to have the conversation about the trends in the results in literacy and numeracy, in the hard sciences, as well as in the technological sciences for this year's Caribbean Examination Council results. So certainly, I want to thank Dr. Young, as well as his other colleague who joined us, that's Dr. Manning, who joined us earlier on the platform to discuss those trends. So folks, what we're going to do now is that we will take a quick break and come back with the second segment of the program. The second segment involves the Laren Kay Simon judgment. And of course, she won big against the Government of Grenada in court in respect of her, what the court has adjudicated to be an unconstitutional dismissal on the part of the NDC administration since her contract didn't end. But of course, we're going to make a determination what that means for the other workers who were also dismissed by the National Democratic Congress administration upon assuming office. What precedent does this particular ruling set? And of course, joining us to have that conversation is Ruggles Ferguson, who was the attorney, the representative of Ms. Simon in court. So folks, stand by. We're going to take a quick break and be right back after this.
We seek the truth.
Would you be handing your resignation to the Minister of Culture tomorrow, sir?
No, I will not.
The leader of the opposition, we have accused your government, sir, of using the Grenada Development Bank to facilitate the financing of personal loans for certain government ministers.
The other side is in no position to talk about those issues, and I will leave it there.
We discover new perspectives.
You know his leadership style. And so many are saying, why are you coming now to talk about those issues?
Now is the time to speak. You have the right to decide who will take over.
When you met with Dr. Mitchell, and perhaps you might want to confirm what that meeting was about in your response. But
Dr. Mitchell, like myself, are Grenadians.
We ask the right questions.
Why was there no report on the work done of the commission? And how is this new committee different from the commission that was initially established back in 2022? So who are these elements that are using you?
I'm disappointed in my political leader.
And why is that animating those political conversations now?
This is a very interesting question.
The Bubb Reports with Dr. Bubb. Thought-provoking, truthful, unbiased, and truly original reporting.
Should your loved ones pass on, they deserve to be treated with dignity. And at S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, we can provide you with that service. We can take you every step of the way during your sorrowful moments. When that need arises, call S.A. Johnson Funeral Home at 347-777-9797. That's 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home is a Caribbean family-owned funeral home. Here in Brooklyn, providing funeral services, but in a dignified way. From cremation to burial to the repatriation of your loved ones, you don't have to go through the hassle, as we provide exceptional service that allows you to mourn and heal peacefully. For more information, visit our website, www.sajohnsonfuneral.org. Send us an email at sajfuneral@aol.com or call 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, because you deserve to be treated with dignity.
calls for justice for the Carriacou 5. We call for justice for Sister Louise Joseph. We call for justice for Sister Angela Russell. We call for justice for Sister Andrea Andrew. We call for justice for Sister Carol Walker. We call for justice for Sister Maxan Francis. We have not seen this practice before, and it does not bode well for fostering good relationships between employer and employee. While the GPWU understands the need for sound principles of professionalism and confidentiality, we will never abide with the intimidation and victimization of our workforce.
Right. Also, there is generally in contracts a termination clause. And as I understand it, in the case of, I think, 2 or 3 of the officers, they were on contract. And in the contract, there was a clause that says that either party may terminate the contract on giving the other 1 month's notice. And in the case of the worker, 1 month's pay in lieu of notice will suffice. And so that's the right that any of the parties to the contract enjoy. And I understand in a couple of the cases, the contracts were ended under those termination clauses. And there would have been a background basis for so doing, ranging from non-performance of the duties under the contract, and in one case, leaving the government employment during the course of the workday to go and do other work. Another case where there was gross disrespect directly to the minister.
Wow. Insubordination.
Yes, exactly. And so from my investigation of the matter, there was nothing wrong, and certainly nothing that rose to the level of victimization, and definitely no terrorist act. As I understand, it was described by one of the union officials. In fact, to speak of a person, especially a senior public officer in such manner, might well amount to defamation.
There are others that the Public Workers Union have been advocating for, who felt as if there was no need to attrition these workers. Do you regret making the blanket claim that, we are going to regularize the workers in the service, or was that something that you still think is possible?
But I mean, I think we just spoke at length about the regularization framework. So
yes, we did. But let us talk. Let us talk, Prime Minister. Let us talk about the workers who are dismissed.
No, so let's. Well, you're saying workers who are dismissed. Kellon, unless you can give me very specifics as to who you're speaking about, I'm not in a position to answer that question, because to me, workers who were dismissed is a general proposition, right? If there are specific instances where an employee or employee's employment was terminated as a result of the change in the government, and if these employees think that the employment was not terminated fairly, the employees, whether they unionized or not, certainly have an opportunity to go through the grievance process to have that addressed. So if the Public Workers Union, for instance, can point to employees under its banner who were dismissed or terminated, and if it thinks they were terminated unfairly, then the Public Workers Union and the employees have the right to go through the process, whether it's via the Labour Commissioner, the Labour Minister, and ultimately an arbitration tribunal to have the matter grieved or addressed. You seem to think that there's an assumption in this question that every time someone's employment terminates on a change in government, that it is as a result of some fault on the part of the employer. One, and I think you pointed to that, many of the jobs let me finish. Many of the jobs that were created by the former administration, in many instances, were jobs done almost deliberately before the election, in many instances, en masse, giving people contracts that in any event were going to expire with fixed terms, to create this impression that if there's a change in administration and your employment subsequently comes to an end, that it is the new administration that has done so. And I want to make this point here, right, that many times the average Grenadian is used coming up to an election in a very deliberate manner by governments who are in power. They give them these short-term employment contracts or short-term contracts for various things, literally putting the persons in a position where, should the administration change, you don't know what your fate will be. And it is an attempt at vote buying. So I'm saying if there are legitimate instances where any government employee was terminated or whose contract came to an end, and they felt that it was not done in accordance with the contract that they had or in accordance with the Employment Act, and the grievance process states that, then I can certainly tell you my administration will respect the outcome of the grievance process.
Respect the outcome of the, and
but
you
I
said
don't want us to leave here thinking that every time an employee is terminated or dismissed, that the employer is wrong, because then it will suggest that basically once someone has a job, you can never engage in disciplinary action against them, regardless of their behavior, regardless of their performance, or regardless of the contractual terms under which you work.
And viewers and listeners, welcome back to this week's edition of the Bubb Report. Now, these were some of the conversations that animated some of the dismissals of contractual employees from the Government of Grenada. A lot of these contractual and seasonal employees were dismissed following the assumption of the National Democratic Congress to state power back in 2022. Of course, some of these issues are still making its way through the Labour Commissioner's office, and of course, especially in relation to the Carriacou workers. Now, last week, a High Court judge ordered the Government of Grenada to pay thousands to a former contracted public officer, mind you, who was not affiliated with any of the Carriacou 6, I believe, but that particular worker was attached to the Attorney General's chambers and was hired under the previous New National Party administration, but of course also fell victim to the dismissals of workers under the new administration in October of 2022. Now, according to the judgment says, quote, as it stands based on the documents before the court, no reasonable cause for the removal of the claimant has been demonstrated by the defendants. Of course, the defendants there being the Attorney General's chambers and the defendants for the Government of Grenada in breach of Section 88, subsection 2 of the Grenada Constitution, the unilateral termination of the claimant's contract without cause, or if there was cause without giving reasons, and a proper hearing is a breach of an enshrined constitutional right, unquote. Now, here to make sense of this matter that was brought before Justice Agnes Asite, or Asite, of course, Ruggles perhaps might give me a correction on this. Ruggles also works in the media, so he can perhaps correct me on that. But Ruggles, of course, was the attorney representing Ms. Kay in this case, and we welcome him to the Bubb Report. Mr. Ruggles Ferguson, KC, welcome to the program, sir.
Yes, hi, good morning, Kellon, and good morning, listeners and viewers. The correct pronunciation is Acti.
Acti. So I was not even close.
Agnes Acti. Yes.
It can go down like a Spanish pronunciation, like acite in Spanish, but you know. All right, but thank you, sir. Of course, you were the attorney for Miss Laren, or Mrs. I'm not sure if it's Mrs. Laren Kay Simon. And of course, this was a very interesting judgment because based on what the Justice Acti ruled in this matter is that no due process was followed and no clear explanation was given for their dismissal. So can you talk about this particular case and why you felt when it came before your desk that there was an impetus for this matter to be adjudicated in the way that it was adjudicated, first and foremost?
Yes. Thank you once again. And just to give some background to the case, Ms. Simon was employed by way of contract, a 2-year contract, in the first instance between December 9, 2019 for a 2-year period. And that period expired, that first contract expired on the 30th of November 2021. And again, following that first contract, her contract was renewed for a further 2 years from 2021 to 2023. She was employed as a legal officer at the Attorney General's chambers. There were no issues with her employment. There were never any complaints, warnings against her in relation to her performance. In fact, when she received the letter of dismissal sometime in October 2022, she was shocked because she had just come from representing the state at a meeting of one of the boards of which she was a member, and on her arrival home, she received a dismissal letter. And that was more than 1 year before her contract was due to expire. So there were no disciplinary complaints or any issues on the record against her. So that's the background. And immediately, well, when I was consulted on the matter, and after some research, because again, when it comes to public officers, and this is an important point, when it comes to public officers, there are certain protections, extra protections under the Constitution for public officers that may not necessarily be there for private individuals or individuals who are employed in the private sector. So, for example, because of the nature of government, government come to power as a result of an election, and these elections are contested as parties. Generally, one party versus another party. The party that gains the majority seats forms the government. Now, when you form the government, you are expected to represent all the people. It's a political party in office. And of course, that government, whichever government it is bound by the Constitution and the laws, just like any other individual. And that case appeared to me to be strikingly similar to a matter in St. Lucia several years ago, which was the subject of a Privy Council decision in St. Lucia concerning a magistrate there at the time who had challenged his dismissal. And the Privy Council, and that's Fraser versus the Attorney General and the Judicial and Legal Services Commission. The Privy Council in that matter, it went all the way to the Privy Council because he won at the High Court. It was appealed. The Court of Appeal reversed the High Court judgment, and Fraser went to the Privy Council, and the Privy Council restored the High Court judgment. And of course, as we know, the Privy Council is our highest court. It still remains our highest court, and lower courts are bound by the decisions of higher courts. So, for example, the High Court and the Court of Appeal is bound by the decision or a decision of the Privy Council, which establishes a particular principle. Whether you agree with it or not, you are bound. There's a principle called stare decisis. You are bound by the decision of the higher court, just as the High Court is bound by the decisions of a decision of the Court of Appeal. And what Fraser said, basically in that case, the Privy Council in Fraser case, Lord Diplock, said that, listen, Fraser is protected by the equivalent of our Section 88 of the Constitution. I think there's would be either Section 91 or 92. I'm subject to correction on that. But it's a section similar to Section 88. And basically, it says, even though there is a contract between parties, that the contract is subject to the Constitution. And therefore, when you are dismissing, you can't just merely dismiss based on what are the contractual provisions before you. But you have to bear in mind that these contractual provisions are subject to constitutional protection. Just to put in simple form. So that's the principle. And it was similar in the sense to the Kay Simon case, because Kay Simon was dismissed based on a contract the state contended. We have a contract with her, and that contract says we can dismiss by giving a period of 1 month's notice to her. Without
and of course, not wanting to cut you, but the Attorney General did make that point following the dismissal of the workers in Carriacou at the time, and I also played that clip, which is consistent with what I suppose their defense was. Yes.
Right. Well, in this case, their defense essentially was that there was a contract, and therefore, under that contract, with or without cause, that you can dismiss, and we exercise that option to dismiss. We need not give a reason for such dismissal. Now, just by the very explanation, you can see the unfairness in that process. Someone who has never been, whose work, either the quality of work or the manner of work, was not subject to any complaint by anybody, and suddenly you have that a dismissal arising on the very day that you are working hard for the very state that you are employed by. So essentially, if I may just simplify it,
yes,
our argument was basically the following. One, yes, there was a contract. Yes, that you can enter into a contract. However, that contract is subject to Section 88 of the Constitution. And Section 88 of the Constitution is the section that protects certain legal officers. So you have different sections of the Constitution that may protect certain kind of public officers or others. But in this case, the legal officers and other officers, but we are dealing with a legal officer here, is protected by Section 88 of the Constitution. And we said essentially that, listen, if you are dismissing her, you must dismiss with cause. And if you have to dismiss with cause, then you have to give her a proper hearing. A proper hearing. And if there are disciplinary charges against her, then she must face the disciplinary charges. And at the end of due process, if the conclusion is that she ought to be dismissed justifiably, then you can do so. However, if you are doing it that way without cause, she's entitled to all her benefits under that particular contract for the duration of the contract. And that is, and I want to make the point again, because her office is protected by Section 88 of the Constitution. And that's why, let me just hasten to add, that there are particular offices under the Constitution that are protected because of the nature of those offices. So, for example, the Director of Public Prosecutions. No one can dictate to the Director of Public Prosecutions who to charge or who not to charge. One. And two, the Director of Public Prosecutions, in his own deliberate judgment, has the power under the Constitution to continue or discontinue a criminal matter that has been started by the police or otherwise. And he is not accountable to any other authority, the government or otherwise, or the state. You have other examples, the Director of Audit. Again, an appointment under the Constitution. You have the Supervisor of Elections. Again, an important appointment under the Constitution. And because of the nature of these offices, you want to insulate them from political direction and political interference. So just so you have legal officers protected under Section 88 of the Constitution, including magistrates and registrars, and the legal offices there are listed. So the first issue with the Kay Simon issue is, first and foremost, that she was terminated in October 2022. The natural expiry of her contract was November 2023. So she's terminated in October with 1 month's notice. So our first response on her behalf was to write to the PS, because it was the permanent secretary who
wrote the termination letter.
And we say, listen, you have no authority in law or otherwise to terminate Ms. Simon. That is not your function. Ms. Simon falls under the Judicial and Legal Services Commission. And if she has to be terminated, just as she was appointed in a particular way, she has to be terminated, acting under the advice and direction of the Independent Judicial and Legal Services Commission. So, and we immediately said, here are the authorities in relation to the dismissal of Ms. Simon. She is protected under the Constitution. Here is the Privy Council judgment. Let us have a discussion and let us resolve this matter. And I just want to say, I just want to make the point again, Kelon, because I think it's important. You know, I think about 80% of matters that go before the court system, you know, sometimes we complain about the length of time in the court system. But about 80% of these matters could be resolved through discussion. There are some, because of the very cutting-edge nature of the law, and in advancing and developing the law, you know, one has to pursue for determination. But certainly the first step is to try to get the matter resolved. And usually when it's resolved and compromised, parties compromise in a way that they are happy with, and it's usually less than if a court has to determine it at the end of the day. It's less stress, less time, and it's more amicable. When you can sit across a table, have a resolution and shake hands after. So that was the attempt. There was some engagement, and I must say, there was some compromise because in January, she did not get any salary between October and January. When January came, the permanent secretary wrote a letter withdrawing her letter of dismissal, and the state accepted that the permanent secretary could not dismiss Ms. Simon. So they withdrew the termination letter of October 2022, and then she was paid for November, December, January, the period under which she was a dismissed worker by virtue of the letter from the permanent secretary. But what happened on the same day? Again, the interesting feature. The Governor General, simultaneously as that letter written by the permanent secretary, simultaneously, the Governor General sends a letter saying, acting on the advice of the Judicial and Legal Services Commission, we basically terminate your services. So she was terminated twice. First by the PS, and second
by the GG.
By the Governor General, acting on the advice of the Judicial
and Legal Services Commission. Yes.
Right. So the PSA basically, I'm terminating you based on it with reference to the contract. So she was terminated twice. So the state says, listen, I'm paying you up to January, January or February 2023. That's when we withdraw the letter. But here, you are now properly terminated by the Governor General, acting on the advice of the Judicial and Legal Services Commission. And then we say, of course, this is not the way it is done. You can't terminate now just out of no way, for no reason, no cause, no reference to the individual, no case for the individual to answer when it is a constitutionally protected position. So you can't just refer to contractual arrangements. And again, it's inherently unfair to do so there. So we said, listen, this ought to be withdrawn, that letter, and that at the very minimum, she should be paid until the expiry of her 2-year contract, which then would have been, it was April to November. So she would have been paid up to March, given the 1-month notice and everything. She was April, so the unexpired term of her contract fell between April and November 2023. So he said, again, listen, this is not the way, it cannot be done like that. The highest court has ruled in an equivalent case in our jurisdiction, and even though it's a St. Lucia case, it falls within the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court, that you cannot do it that way. So, and I think that is where things fell down, because at that point, then we were promised that we'll get back to you on the point, and as sometimes happens, nobody gets back to you. You send a letter, say, hey, remember you're supposed to get back to me. And
nobody responds to the letter.
We actually filed the claim in July, in August, early August, because it was then we were engaging with the Attorney General's office here, and with the dismissal in February, then the JLSC, the Judicial and Legal Services Commission, which is the authority responsible for the appointment of judges, the Judicial and Legal Services Commission came into the picture. It's an independent commission, and then we apprised them, said, listen, this is not constitutional. It does not fall within our constitutional requirements, and therefore we will be forced to reluctantly take action against both the state, the Attorney General's chambers, and the Judicial and Legal Services Commission if this is not withdrawn and if it doesn't settle in the way we propose, that it be settled in a compromising way. And again, it will have been settled very quietly, and you know, at the end of the day, we all shake hands and move on. But of course, the long and short of it, the bottom line, as the saying goes, is that by the end of July, despite several bits of correspondence, it became clear that the state was not prepared to budge. And we also gave deadlines to the Judicial and Legal Services Commission. Those deadlines came and went, and therefore we sued. The action taken was both against the Attorney General's chambers, because the constitutional matter, and even in this case, the AG's chambers was directly involved. But when you sue the state generally, you have to sue through the AG's chambers and the Judicial and Legal Services Commission, because it's the JLSC that advised the Governor General to issue
the dismissal letter. Yes,
right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
now, there are two issues here that I did not see come up in the judgment. As a layman, in respect of that, the background to this matter, and that has to do with whether or not your client pursued remedies through the Office of the Labor Commissioner, because I do know that the Office of the Labor Commissioner, they do have a grievance process as well that speaks to that attempts to adjudicate the dismissal of workers from the service. Why did you not? Why did she, or maybe she did, pursue that avenue? Or is it because of the nature of that position that perhaps then the Office of the Labor Commissioner is rendered moot at that point?
Right. In fact, for several reasons, Kelon, I'm happy that you raised that question, because I happen to be privy to a couple of the clips before the introduction of this program.
Yes.
And your latter postulation is correct, that this is a matter, it's a purely constitutional matter, though the state says, in effect, this is a private law matter between government and an employee. We said, no, it's a constitutional matter and it should be determined by a constitutional court in accordance with the Constitution. So by virtue of the fact that the nature of it, the nature of the office, and the protection afforded by the Constitution. In fact, Ms. Simon is not a unionized worker, was not a unionized employee, and therefore the provisions of the labor code referencing matters to the Ministry of Labor did not necessarily apply. One can use it at the end of the day as an employee, depending on the route that you're going. But we went straight to the constitutional route. And in that case, that route supersedes any other route. But I want to make the point as you raise that, because it's important generally, and I find sometimes there is a mix-up of roles. And just to quickly say, in the private sector, if you believe you are unfairly dismissed, then you go through the route, Labor Commissioner route, the Office of the Ministry of Labor. Starts with the Labor Commissioner, conciliatory talks. If it's not resolved there, it goes to the Minister for mediation. And no party is bound by the results of either conciliation or mediation. If not, at the end of the day, it goes to arbitration, which is binding. So, and again, can be taken by the employment in the public sector too, where you are represented by a union and you bring this matter to the Office of the Labor Commissioner. For the constitutional offices, though, those offices that are protected by the Constitution, there are inherent mechanisms that protect such offices. So, for example, a public officer who is dismissed by the Public Service Commission has a right of appeal to the Public Service Commission Board of Appeal. You can also make challenges there based on if you contend there's improper procedure, either at the level of the PSC or at the level of the Board of Appeal. You can go to the High Court for certain declarations. But the neutral place to resolve matters, generally, whether it be the trade union involved or whether it be the private employee in the private sector involved, then the Office of the Labor Commissioner is always open. But this would not have been a proper case to bring to the Office of the Labor Commissioner.
I'm muted here. So therefore, there was no need. Now let us talk about, are there any legal precedent? And I suspect, since based on how this matter was adjudicated, that may not be any legal precedent for the other cases involving dismissed workers during that period as well, because those positions are not constitutional. And I'm speaking here of the workers that the unions have been advocating for, especially the workers from Carriacou.
Okay, well, let me just say up front that I am not familiar with
those cases. Yes.
I'm not totally, apart from what has been said in the media, I am not intimately familiar with the Carriacou matter. What I have done, and I'm in the process of dealing with individual cases of dismissals. Individuals. Kay Simon was one. In fact, there's another who is a public officer, and that matter was brought constitutionally, and it's awaiting judgment before the High Court. And there are one or two others that are not constitutional, but fall under the private law of contract. And those are challenged. So I can only speak with authority
on those matters.
In fact, in due course, they will be addressed, I suppose, in relation to one. Hopefully, we'll get the judgment sooner rather than later. But it is important when you're dealing with public officers, because government is a continuum. When you're treating with government, you're not treating with a political party. You're treating with government. Now, that government may have arisen as a result of the players being in political parties and that political party winning an election. But at the end of the day, and as part of our separation of powers, and I always make the point about separation of powers principle. You have the lawmaking arm of the state, which is Parliament, and in the Parliament, you will have players from both sides, government and opposition. And Parliament is the sole lawmaking arm of the state. Then you have policy making, that's the executive. And in this case, we refer to cabinet as the policy-making arm of the state. They take policy decisions. And in cabinet, you have ministers of government. You don't have the two parties, unlike cabinet. Unlike parliament, you have the ministers now who are appointed and who come, in a sense, from one party. And then now you have the judiciary, which is the court system. And you have some independent entities under the Constitution that would protect the public worker from direct interference or arbitrary dismissal or abuse in the case of a new government comes into office. Whoever that government may be, the same rules apply. It's the same constitution that applies. So, for example, in this case, in the Kay Simon case, two of the cases that we referenced, two very pivotal cases and groundbreaking cases in this region. One is Endel Thomas versus the Attorney General of Trinidad and Tobago. And that is a 1982 Privy Council decision. Endel Thomas was an assistant superintendent of police in Trinidad, and he was dismissed. And the background facts are not necessarily important. But he took action. He went to the High Court, to the Court of Appeal, ultimately to the Privy Council. And what the Privy Council stated, again, is that we are independent. Trinidad and Tobago and the other countries are independent states. Because part of the defense in the Endel Thomas case is that, listen, these are public servants, and public servants are dismissible at the pleasure of the Crown. Public servants are dismissible at the pleasure of the Crown. So that's what the AG's chambers in the Endel Thomas case argued. And the Privy Council says no. Again, supporting the arguments raised by the team representing Endel Thomas, is that you no longer have dismissal at the pleasure of the Crown. These are independent territories with independent constitutions. And you have the insulation under the independence constitutions, insulation of the public servant or the public officer from the politician, to put it just in general terms. And that insulation comes from the Public Service Commission that is expected. So it's not a cabinet that has and fires. The Public Service Commission has and fires public officers and exercises disciplinary control over public officers. And therefore, as the Privy Council noted in the Endel Thomas case, public servants are insulated. There is no longer this concept under independence constitutions of dismissal at the pleasure of the Crown. You can't just dismiss a public officer that way. So it was that case. We use other cases too, but I'm just referring to the base principles. Base principles, yes, the Crown always has the power. In those days where there is a king and everybody else is a subject of the king, then you do as the king says, because the king is the king. Where there are independence constitutions, the king is no longer the king as he once used to be, because you have these protective mechanisms under the Constitution that insulates the public officer from the politician. So, and in this case, because you see what could happen is that somebody is working today, this is a job. This is what you depend on. You're working today.
That's your bread and butter.
Somebody brings a letter for you tomorrow and say suddenly that job is gone. No reason. You can be the best worker in the world. But what happens? The powers that be says, for whatever reason, we need you no more. And therefore it results in very unfairly. And that's why, as we contended, that Miss Simon was entitled to damages for distress and inconvenience. And in fact, the court awarded, after a hearing, what much more than we were prepared to accept in discussions with a view to amicably resolving the matter. So,
absolutely. Now, yes, go ahead. Finish your thought, and then I'll.
So I was saying again, the case is an important reminder of the one, importance of the Constitution, two, the need to understand the Constitution and the role, broader role it plays when it comes to public servants. Three, it again emphasizes the importance of settling these matters as far, and I'm not saying because if a party is convinced that, listen, he or she wants the court to determine it, but the importance of engaging and settling these matters as amicably as possible. And as I indicated, that I believe 80% of matters before the court system, when parties sit across the table, it's a different vibe too. You can agree to disagree. At the end of the day, you can shake hands and say, we can live with this settlement. And it's a much quicker process. This case emphasizes the importance of the Constitution, what I would say the importance of the Constitution, and it brings to the fore the special protection that is afforded a public officer under the Constitution. Now, it's not each and every single officer that may be
that will fall under that rubric.
Because it's important. Not everybody who works within the public service can be classified as a public servant to whom would be afforded special constitutional protection. And again, it just says without, whichever the government, it's not a political, it's not a political issue per se. Whichever the government in place, then there is a body of law, and that's what the rule of law is about, that will make a determination. Miss Simon had the courage of her own conviction. As I said, she was distressed, and she felt that, I need to be vindicated in all of this. It reflects badly on my record to be almost summarily dismissed in the way I was. And therefore, she chose to pursue it and get the end result that she has gotten. And, all of these cases, I will say, they help to advance the law. They help to open our eyes on the importance of the Constitution, because we are in 50 years of independence. 50 years of independence equals 50 years of our Constitution. And not enough emphasis has been placed on our Constitution over the years. It's there, but it's like a document just sitting there that is mentioned for convenience. But the Constitution shows, and particularly in pension cases, which also concerns public workers, because you have these string of cases dealing with the Constitution and pensions from retrenchment in 1987. Donovan and the Attorney General retrenched under the Retrenchment Act that was supposed to give you a golden handshake. And Donovan says, no, that handshake is not golden. I'm protected by Section 84(8) of the Constitution. And therefore, I must be treated, irrespective of the number of years I have worked, as though I had reached the retirement age of 60. And Donovan challenged, lost at the High Court, succeeded at the Court of Appeal, and that opened the way for several people retrenched in 1987 to receive pensions. Then you have the Richard Duncan case, you have the Irvin McQueen case. More recently, you have the Herman and Armstrong case. And even more recently, in 2021, 2022, you have the case with pensions involving the three major unions representing public officers, TAU and the Public Workers Union and Teachers Union. And again, it just shows that, there's constitutional redress. Section 16 of the Constitution says, listen, if you think your rights have been, are being, or are likely to be infringed, you can come to the Constitutional Court under Section 16 if it's a fundamental right, or under Section 101 if it is a non-fundamental right of the Constitution, or even under Section 37 if it deals with election or membership of Parliament. So there are these mechanisms, and that's why it's so important, the public education aspect of it, because I find more and more that there are rights that people have, but they either don't exercise it,
or they don't know that they have those rights
because they don't know. They don't know, and then they receive no guidance. And people who can be in a much better position, leaving or being dismissed, they can be in a much better position, but they simply don't know, or in some cases may be afraid to, or in yet some cases do not have the kind of support mechanisms to carry them through because they are frustrated. But in Miss Simon's case,
yes,
she was frustrated, she was depressed, but she pressed on. She always determined that, listen, irrespective of how far she brings it, she wants to be vindicated. And when this happens, it's not for just her benefit, but it's for the benefit of every single officer. In this case, every single officer who is protected by Section 88 of the Constitution, more importantly, because you benefit from it. And it's also for the advancement of the law. So in future cases, there are precedents that we have that could say, listen, this should guide us in how we resolve particular matters. It's all part of the rough and tumble of
absolutely
the system of law.
Yeah. So the other issue here, Ruggles, has to do. You said there is another case. Is the other case also based on challenges to Section 88 of the Constitution that was breached by the government?
No, it's not.
If you're willing to share.
No, it's not. Well, I won't go into it.
I know you would not be able to go into it. It's sub judice. I know it's sub judice.
Yeah, it's pending judgment. But it has to deal with another section of the Constitution. Somebody who was dismissed, terminated, a public officer, and we contend that that particular public officer is subject to constitutional protection, just as we said with Kay Simon. But it just deals with another section of the Constitution, and what we are saying is that that person then should be automatically entitled to certain pensions and benefits under the Constitution, which of course he was not entitled to. He gives the normal 1 month 1 month pay, and that is that. But so that case, I wouldn't go into it because it was, as I say, it is before the court. The trial has been dealt with already. It's pending judgment, and there are others who fall. A few others that fall not under the Constitution, but under what I would say basically law of contract principles, private law of contract principles. And, one hopes that out of all of this, there can be even easier settlement of matters once the court has provided the guidance. Then you can have settlement of matters in relation to other matters not yet brought to court, but
right. So those principles, as you attorneys say, of stare decisis, is that the correct term?
Well,
I don't know if you use that
yes. Well, yeah,
in
you're
the
throwing some
Commonwealth.
technical things on me there, Kelon. Yes, but that's like
I did some law in graduate school, some law,
yes,
obviously.
yes,
You know,
stare decisis. In other words, it has been determined by a higher court.
Yes.
And the lower courts are therefore subject to that principle of law. You must apply it in cases that come after. It's not based on how the High Court judge feels or how the Justice of Appeal feels. If the Privy Council has laid down a principle, that principle must then be applied. You are bound to apply it because a higher court has set the principle. And just so if a Court of Appeal sets a principle, then the High Court must set it because of the hierarchical nature of the system.
Absolutely. Ruggles, this has been an education. There is one question, and then I will close this segment from Bob Marisha, who's asking, Attorney Ferguson, why do you use the term negotiation as opposed to arbitration? Are they synonymous terms?
No, they are not. I suppose he's referring to when I say negotiations before bringing a case.
Before bringing the matter to court. Yes.
Well, yes. So it's arbitration is a technical term that deals with a particular process. So, for example, just to use a common example, under the Employment Act and the Labor Relations Act, which together form the Labor Code. So if you have a matter, an employee says, I am dismissed unfairly, then what you do is then you bring a complaint subject to, I think it's 82, Section 82 of the Employment Act, to the Labor Commissioner in what you call conciliation talks. So the Labor Commissioner will call the employer, the employee will be there, and as an independent person, the Labor Commissioner will hear both sides, take the law into consideration, and will make a recommendation. If that recommendation is accepted by both sides, then that's the end of the matter. If, however, it's rejected by both sides, next process called mediation, in which the Minister of Labor will then do a mediation. And mediation really tries to get the parties to settle, and the minister would make recommendations. If the party rejects it now, then you can go to arbitration. I won't go into the technical things of arbitration, but we have an arbitration act. And unlike mediation and conciliation, arbitration is binding. In other words, an arbitration tribunal or an arbitrator hears the matter and makes a decision that is binding on the parties. In the case of negotiations aimed at arriving at an amicable resolution. So I hope this clears it up.
Absolutely. Yes, Mr. Ferguson. So thank you again.
Kelon, I see the system.
Go ahead.
I hope I'm being heard. I see the system.
No, it lagged for it lagged for a second, but we were able to get the essence of your response. Yes. Yes, we were able to get the essence of your response there, Ruggles. Of course, most of what was articulated by Mr. Ferguson, I believe we were able to hear.
Okay, but I don't need to repeat.
No, you don't need to repeat. Absolutely not. No. Yes. No, not at all. So, Ruggles, thank you, sir, for appearing on this week's edition of the Bubb Report. This was a very enlightening and educational discourse that I believe our viewers found helpful in making sense of the outcome of this case. I think we're having some lag there with Ruggles. So, viewers and listeners, I think we got the essence of what Mr. Ferguson was articulating. So, again, on behalf of the producers of the Bubb Report, we thank our guests for showing up, Mr. Ferguson. We were just making the point that we got the essence of what you articulated, even though there was some lag there. Are you able to hear me now, Ruggles? Yeah, I think we lost Ruggles there. But again, viewers and listeners, we're having some internet issues there, but we were able to capture the essence of what Mr. Ferguson articulated. As I was saying earlier, we want to thank our two earlier guests, as well as Mr. Ferguson, for appearing on the Bubb Report this week. If you have not had an opportunity to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, please ensure that you're doing so. If you have not had an opportunity to share this program, please ensure that you're sharing this program so that others can have an opportunity to partake and learn from all of the issues that we articulated and distilled today. Of course, starting next week, we'll be having a series of programs in respect of the very important and mission critical work of recovering from Hurricane Beryl, not only in Carriacou and Petite Martinique, but also in the northern part of Grenada, and the implications of the financial implications, that is, of the government's decision to go before Parliament for supplementary funding to fund the rest of the national budget for this fiscal year. It appears as if at this time of year, government goes before Parliament for that supplementary funding as the session of Parliament comes to a close. But there are other issues in respect of funds that were released to Grenada that also must be articulated, as well as the current state of recovery on the sister island of Carriacou and Petite Martinique. And of course, the role of the Samaritan's Purse. All of those issues will be distilled and articulated in another edition of the Bubb Report. Of course, on behalf of my hardworking producers, I'm your humble host, Dr. Kellen Bubb. We thank you for joining us this week, and we will see you next week for another installment of the Bubb Report. Take care now. Bye-bye.
Don't go there.
You are a technocrat. I mean, you can speak to whether or not it was appropriate or inappropriate for that to occur. Would you have done that as a permanent secretary?
Politicians get the information from wherever source that they can.
That's going to be the extent of your answer.
Yeah.
Don't go there.
There's a lot of noise around the data protection bill that, in my respectful view, is not warranted.
I was one of those making noise, and it's simply because I was concerned about that specific section 33.
Don't go there.
Are you going to be offering yourself up as political leader of the party?
I see you've called me have a much more than diplomatic passport. I don't mind that.
Don't go there.
What is the relationship like between you and your leader, Dr. Mitchell, your boss, Dr. Mitchell?
I'm not sure how to explain how to answer this question at this time. I prefer not to answer.
Don't go there.
They said that you approached the bank for the loan before the election and that it only materialized after the election. There are also conflicting reports around the quantity of monies that were received. What is the reality here?
People try to extort the truth and to make all kinds of things about it. I just stay quiet. So if you notice, I was really and truly quiet about the whole matter.
Well, except with not with the New Today newspaper. The New Today newspaper reported on this, so I'm not sure you were quiet on this. Go ahead, Honorable. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just trying to answer your question, right?
Don't go there.
I think we just spoke at length about the regularization framework. So
yes, we did. But let us talk, Prime Minister. Let us talk about the workers who are dismissed.
The Bubb Report. We go there.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for checking out the Bubb Report's social media pages. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch our weekly live show, follow our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages. and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can catch repeat episodes on Wednesdays at 4 and 5 p.m. respectively on CRFM Radio and GBN TV in Grenada. We are also viewed on Sundays at 8 p.m. on WPG 10 throughout the Caribbean. Thanks for watching.